Hi, this is John Jackson Miller, and you're listening to the FSF Popcast,
the show where Commander Riker went to learn how to get a leg up on the competition.
Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 131. He'll know that when he puts on the red shirt and joins the other red shirts aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701 in their mission to boldly go, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back and what's left of his dry cleaning.
All right, guys, our guest today is a New York Times bestselling author of books in both the Star Wars and Star Trek universe. He's also written for Halo and a few other universes. But his latest offering, which you will be able to pick up on February 21st, is this beautiful book right here entitled Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The High Country. See, he's holding up a copy of it too. So we are very excited.
Fancy books.
Yeah, our fancy schmancy hardcover cool books that got sent to us. Anyway, we are very excited and very happy to welcome John Jackson Miller to the FSF podcast. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. So first off, again, thank you for sending me the book. Like we were talking about in pre-show, I've had an opportunity to read a little bit of it to kind of get into the book, kind of get a feel for it. And without giving away any details, I want to say one thing. For me, we were talking about how sometimes I'm a little bit of a slow reader. I do like audiobooks. I prefer those. But I do like how you jumped right in with characters that we know and that we love, and it grabs the attention right away. I thought you did a really good job of starting to build in the other characters in some of the supplemental chapters right after that. So it was great action right into the story. And I was like, wow, we're jumping right into this. Okay. I felt like I was right in the middle of an episode as soon as we got into the book. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool introduction into the book. So here's what I'm hoping you'll do. Within the details that you feel comfortable sharing, tell everybody about the book and where the idea for the High Country came from.
Okay, well, the Strange New Worlds franchise was not on the air yet when I was asked to write the novel for it by Kirsten Beyer, who is the executive producer, one of the executive producers of the show. And I have worked with Kirsten, as well have the other people who have done streaming series novels. Because Kirsten she's in the writer's room on Discovery. She's the co-creator of Picard. And then, of course, Strange New Worlds. And so just about every one of our books starts with a discussion with her. And in this case, it was something where, it was something where it was wide open in terms of what I could write about. I sometimes have a blank that I've got to fill in. So, the Enterprise War novel is where the Enterprise was during season 1 of Discovery. The Die Standing novel is where Georgiou was, the Emperor, in between season 1 and season 2. Her first mission for Section 31. My Picard Rogue Elements novel, that is, the origin story of Captain Rios, more or less. But this was something where it was like, okay, well, a mission for the Enterprise, and I kind of knew where it could be set, and so I really spent a few weeks just thinking about what was going on in my life. And at the time, what was going on in my life is my house had been lifted off the ground physically. I live in an 1853 farmhouse in Wisconsin. And just in between when I got the offer to write the book and when I had to start doing anything in terms of thinking about it, the basement wall caved in. And so we had to get a team to come out and actually physically lift the house. And I had to decamp out of the house with my family during that time. And it got me thinking a lot about, there are a lot of stories in Star Trek about people being out of place, being trapped away from all the things that they need to be able to use. And in particular, the Enterprise crew, or at least several members of it, become trapped on a planet, a single, very strange new world, where technology does not work. And by technology, not even, working, I don't just mean, their modern, 23rd century stuff. I mean, you can't get a light bulb to work on this planet. And, that really sort of create a situation where I once I knew kind of what I wanted to do, and I knew that I had to keep Enterprise out of the picture, but still able to monitor what was going on. Everything goes from there. So we do have a situation where on this planet, it is one world, but many different facets to it, and our characters are separated. They are having to they're going on journeys both to try to find one another, find a way off of this planet, and figure out what's going on this place, because there's a series of mysteries that we're going to confront. And along the way, we also get to confront some serious issues with regard to the Prime Directive. The Prime Directive is brand new as of the Strange New World show. Up until now, it has been called General Order Number 1.
Right.
And they're really just sort of feeling their way through. All of these things are sort of the first encounters with this kind of a problem. And so this novel, and if you're 10 chapters in, you haven't figured out all the secrets of it yet, I'll tell you that. This novel brings up a particular kind of Star Trek story. And what I like to do with these, with my novels, where I tie in any way or shape or form to an episode, I like to take it the next step and say, okay, yeah, well, what next? Die Standing shows what happened to the Iosians. Those are the mobsters from the Untouchables planet from the original series. It shows what happened to them 100 years later. I have other stories. The Die Standing novel gets into. You remember that gaseous cloud that was driving Kirk crazy in the episode Obsession? Well, what was that really all about? Do clouds just do things? Well, that's in there, and I follow along. Even my very first story for Star Trek, which was an e-novella that I did called Absent Enemies, that looked at that episode of The Next Generation called The Next Phase, where Geordi and Ro were trapped in between phases and able to walk through walls and things. But why didn't they fall out of the back of the ship? Why did that Romulan who was between phases actually look like he was sitting down in a chair at one point? How did that happen? Well, I took that as a challenge, and that was part of that story. And then what I do is I work it into whatever the larger issues that I want to explore are. And so I really wanted this to be an epic, something that it is the longest book I've written for Star Trek, or really for anything. It is Gene Roddenberry pitched this series as Wagon Train to the Stars, and that referred to the TV show Wagon Train that was on, which is going across a wide expanse and running into adventures one after the other. Well, I kind of do that, and one of the really cool things we were able to do is we had just announced this novel at Star Trek Mission Chicago last year in April. We got the cover, the same day. We were starting to promote it. The very next week, I am at, I think it was called Fan X Indianapolis, or Fan Expo Indianapolis. There's 9 conventions with Fan and X in their name. I'm not sure what they are. It's so confusing. But anyway, I'm there on the floor. I've had a really great day because I've just met Jamie Farr and Loretta Swit from MASH, and so for an old TV fan like me, it was really great. And then I hear that because of the supply chain problems, all the books have been pushed 3 months ahead. And so this novel ended up being, it was going to be a Thanksgiving, pre-Christmas release, to now we're in February. And
oh boy, yeah.
Which is not the best time to release a book unless you want no competition, which is just as good. So there's positives, I suppose. And I said, okay, here's what I'd like to do. I didn't think we were going to have time to do it in the previous thing. But I said, okay, I've got all these maps that I've been working with showing what the planet looks like and where everybody is and everything. can we do the maps in the book? And it turned out, yeah, everybody was on board. And so there are several maps in this novel. You really shouldn't skip ahead to them before you actually get to those parts. But
now you tell me.
Yeah, no, well, I know people can't avoid it. People can't avoid it. But the purpose of the maps is, so that you can kind of follow along as you get there. And the maps are not, as you will have seen, the maps are not sort of the Enterprise's view of things. They're not, these are not satellite maps. These are not, this is not one of those things where there's an LCARS display and, things all around it, and it looks very Star Trek-y. No, these are the maps from the point of view of the natives, the people who live on the planet, various different styles they're in. And so we were able to actually do quite a few, more. When I did my book, Lost Tribe of the Sith for Star Wars, we only had 2 maps in there, and it still made it a beloved kind of a thing because, who doesn't like a map in a book? So it turns out this is the first Star Trek novel since 2000 that has maps in it. And that was a stitch in time. Those were maps of the capital city of Cardassia. Well, these are here we got some more. So, this is a cool thing. And the other cool thing about it is if you're into audiobooks, as I understand it, if you buy the audiobook, you also get the maps in a PDF supplement. And that idea, the whole reason that they're going to be available is because I did a show. I do a show every year for Wisconsin Public Radio in December. And we decided this year that we would book Robert Patkoff, who does he reads Strange New Worlds, and also he's read Enterprise War and the Rogue Elements novel of mine. And we also booked January Lavoie, and she is the reader for the Die Standing novel. And so we did a great hour that's on there. Go to WPR.org, search my name, and you can find the hour. And an hour on what's involved in doing not a podcast, but doing an audiobook for Star Trek. And we got to the end of it, and off air, I said, well, I know you're in studio working on this novel right now, Robert. I just wish that people would be able to get the maps. And they both said you can. They actually have a thing where, if you buy the audiobook, there are supplemental PDFs that are available sometimes. That's cool. So as far as I know, we're going to have that. So really cool. Hopefully people can look for that. But yeah, and then as you said, that novel's coming out February 21st, audiobook, ebook, and hardcover.
Awesome. Excellent. I want to say one thing before anybody else jumps in with any other questions. And this is not a spoiler by any means, but so 2 things I found interesting about the few chapters I've had a chance to read. Number one, I love the fact that, so I was never a big fan of Star Trek rather, up until Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is what kind of got me into Star Trek, and I've been watching it since. And I'm in like season 1 of Next Generation right now. But what I did, so I tell you that because 2 reasons. Number one, I thought it was interesting how, as I'm reading through the book and I'm hearing I'm reading the dialogue from different characters, I'm honestly hearing it in their voice. Especially with Una Chin Riley and some of the dialogue that she has with some of the people on the planet. So just some of the comments she made, I was like, I could hear Rebecca Romaine say those things. It was just very cool. And then the other thing is, some of it made me laugh, and it's mainly because there was a couple references to the Prime Directive and some of the things that were happening because of the Prime Directive. And we literally on our live show just this past Monday talked about the Prime Directive because I was so blasted confused coming in from a Star Wars universe trying to figure out what in the heck the Prime Directive was and how it affected things. And so yeah, it was just kind of funny that it was the timing of everything. And like, yeah, I'm sitting here reading a book going, and all of a sudden we're talking about the Prime Directive. I'm like, well, hey, 3 nights ago, I might not have understood this. So,
well, that was on purpose. Your colleagues contacted me in the middle of last year and said, hey, in February, we're going to have this conversation. No, that's look, every novel is somebody's first. Every every episode of a show is somebody's first. And yeah, they're not great episodes to come in on if you don't know what is going on. And same for books. You wouldn't, I did a trilogy called Prey, and you wouldn't have wanted to come in on book 3 of that for that Star Trek trilogy I did. But hopefully we give everybody what they need to kind of hit the ground running. There's a focus here on a core group of characters that should be familiar to people. One of the things that I do is, this is, as I say, is a big sprawling adventure of a book. And I alternate between chapters where, it's Christopher Pike, the hero, and then we go out to see everybody else, or not everybody, but most of the other characters, and some of the locals on the planet as well. They have their sequences in there, and then I try to get right back to it and keep it kinetic and keep it going. That's one of the things that came up in the interview about that we did about audiobooks as well. Is the audiobooks have really changed the way that I write. When I started out, I would have been writing, for Star Wars novels. It would have been normal for a chapter to be, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words. What's happened is in the interim, the Kindle has come along, which is actually telling us how much people read and how long they read and for what snippets of time they read. And then in particular, Audible with audiobooks is actually saying to us, hey, here's how long people tend to listen when they turn the app on. What you find is that because people are commuting, because people are in their cars or their whatever kind of situations, they tend to dip in and out of stories about as often as people stop to watch a commercial on TV. Or not that they want to stop to watch a commercial, but you'll notice that even in the streaming series, even in Strange New Worlds, when it airs on TV, on Paramount Plus, they still have sort of act breaks that are 6 minutes, 7 minutes, or something in there. In part because they know that it's also going to air on Pluto, or it might air on one of the other CBS affiliated channels. But it's also the case that people tend to digest entertainment in chunks. And so it's become much more the case that, I think I've got 79 chapters in this book, and they're about 1,500 words each, or somewhere along that line.
Right. Yeah.
I think it has an impact on, the action in the story, because things are changing a lot faster because you have that many more opportunities for cliffhangers, that many more surprises, that many more big reveals. And that's kind of something that, I started as a comics writer. I was accustomed to doing that anyway. Every page you flip is a reveal, is an opportunity for a new character to appear, for an explosion. So, I kind of imported that into the novel writing.
Perfect.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I was going to actually ask about your comics, because in doing research, it said that you were Wikipedia, which we know is not the most accurate thing in the world, said that you were a publisher of mini comics, and your own website says that you wrote for a small press comic series, Faraway Looks.
Yeah.
So what are mini comics? Why don't we see more of them these days? And can any of those originals still be found?
Okay. Wow. If they can be found, I'd be surprised. Okay. The small press movement, the fanzines start in comics in 1960. One of the two first fanzines that ever came out was a newsletter by my friend Maggie Thompson, her and her husband Don, and that evolved into. Yes, there were fanzines talking about Star Wars and Star Trek and comics and that sort of thing, but there were also comics, art, newsletters that would be out where people would have their own stories. they actually had amateur press associations where everybody would bundle all their comics together, put them in a single book called an apazine, and then they would photocopy it and mail it around to everybody. That was in the 70s, and that's kind of going away in the 80s. By the 80s, pretty much everybody's got their own photocopier. And when my dad got his copy machine and I started using it, through the pages of Maggie's magazine called Comics Buyer's Guide, I connected with other people who were publishing, drawing their own comics and publishing and sending them out back and forth. And, no money was changing hands, but there are a lot of people that came into the comic scene in the 90s and 2000s that, that was their amateur hour, stuff. That was what they did. And so in my case, I can't draw. I'm not a good artist. But it did teach me something about how when I'm writing a script, what can fit into a panel and what the tempo should be and how many words should be there. So it allowed me to get into solidarity with the artist somewhat. Now, the reason you don't see these around so much anymore is because technology, again, these became the web comics, the same way that fanzines gave way to blogs, or just regular sites. So again, if I had grown up 30 years later, I would almost certainly have, had a web comic. I did have a web comic at one point. It didn't do very well, but we did it for a couple of years. But again, it was just something where, it was a training ground for a lot of folks, and it was just a fun hobby thing.
Cool.
Interesting. So one of the things, you are a storyteller, and we love hearing the stories of how different people came to be or how things originated. And you being the hero of our story, what is your origin story? What was it that got you into writing, and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I can actually now say this because before I had written this book, I had no reason to bring this in, but I was born the night the Piece of the Action episode first aired. That was the one that has the mobsters and uses all the in Star Trek where they used all the sets from the Untouchables because it was the same studio. Cool. But it was some time after that before I actually I started reading comics age 6. I started drawing my own comics at the same time. And typing out my own stories on our Smith Corona typewriter. My mother was a grade school librarian, so she encouraged me to keep all my comics and put them in order and hang on to them. Star Wars comes along 1977. I think I'm 9 years old at that point. And my sister Kathy, one of the cool things about an older sibling who's into pop culture is she had introduced me to Monty Python and George Carlin and just about everything else that was out there. And, she made a mission in her life to get me in to see Star Wars, which was difficult because Star Wars at the time, we were not in the multiplex era yet. Getting in, on Saturday afternoons when a kid can go to a movie is not always so easy. And so I did dedicate the novel Kenobi when I did put that out in 2013 to my sister Kathy for making sure that her kid brother got in to see the movie. That's the line that's in there. And so it sort of goes from there. Obviously, I'm a big Star Wars fan of the comics. I've got the trading cards, and Kathy's helped me get all the action figures and everything. Star Trek comes on a little bit later. Even though I'm aware of the series and I've seen some episodes, it was in syndication then, so the episodes would air randomly, and that's a thing that people today in the streaming era don't understand,
right?
which is that these things were never intended to be watched in any order, and so it always is the case that people start a series saying, well, when is this going to get good? And if you say, season 2, they're like, what? They don't understand. They don't understand why why you have to wait that long, or season 3 in some series cases, or season 4. But that is how it works. I continued doing, as mentioned, my own fanzines and comics, became a big collector of comics. I got a journalism degree, was the editor of my campus paper at Tennessee, took a left turn into, I got pretty much the last Soviet studies degree that was offered in this country, the last master's degree in it. Because, and I've told this joke over 100 times, so anyone who's heard it, I apologize, but I would have gone for my doctorate, but the Soviet Union collapsed on my dissertation. I was literally driving back from Indiana University, where I had taken the summer program for learning Russian. And before I got back to college, the coup had happened in the Soviet Union, and by the end of the next week, everything that I was planning on studying was gone. Oh. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna just I'm gonna take the master's and I'm gonna go get a job. The job ended up being editing a line of trade magazines for the lumber business. And I've said this line before too, but I don't know, I don't know what you know about the lumber business, but it's not anywhere near as glamorous as all that.
It's not, no.
or interesting. And I struggled with that long enough to get a copy of Comics Buyer's Guide. Again, that paper that I had subscribed to for years that was run by Don and Maggie Thompson. Saw an ad in the back of it where they were hiring for an editor for the sister publication of Comics Buyer's Guide. This is Comics Retailer, the trade magazine for the comics industry. Mm-hmm. And I was hired as the editor for that. I moved up here to Wisconsin 30 years ago from Tennessee. And I arrived just in time for the comics industry to collapse. So this is once again me and my luck. I once you've knocked down the Soviet Union, I guess just
you can apparently do anything.
Yeah, publishing business, and so I spent the next 7 years walking the comics market through this terrible collapse that we were in, and things start to improve in the early 2000s. And rebound, after that. And it is in that stretch in 2003 that I got the gig to write my first comic series, and that was Crimson Dynamo at Marvel. If you're seeing a pattern there, it's because Crimson Dynamo is the Russian Iron Man. And so I wrote a series that updated with Crimson Dynamo for the post-Cold War period. And that led to a year on Iron Man, which led to me getting to write Star Wars comics. And once Knights of the Old Republic is going, and it goes for like 5 years, that gets the novels into the picture. And then Star Trek and every other door starts to open then, because really, as I've said before, it's about getting your passport stamped. Once they know that you can, write about a certain group of characters or write in a certain universe and not mess everything up, right. and that you can hit your deadlines, that tends to lead to job offers.
There you go.
I do love that it was your sister that got you into Star Wars, though, because I feel like that with my brothers. My brothers are 10 and 12 years older than me. So, yeah, I mean, my intro to Star Wars, I don't remember watching the original trilogy because it was just part of our life. Yeah. But when Phantom Menace came out and they're like, hey, we're going to go see this new Star Wars movie. You want to come with us? And I'm like, yeah, of course I want to come see it with you. I love that that's like the older siblings are like, hey, we're going to raise and nurture this little nerd. And it's worked. It's worked out for me.
That's exactly what I did. And I've been mentioning Kathy in all these broadcasts. She's had some health challenges here lately, but I'm trying to get her as many of the podcast links as I can. And and no, it is everything about, I think the way that things worked out for me does harken back to something back in the day. The fact that when I was 14 and got to high school, the fact that everybody else who had been into comics or role-playing games or video games or anything cool suddenly decided, oh well, we're now into dating and drinking and other things, and we don't need any of that stuff anymore. John, do you want our stuff?
Sure.
Yeah. And so, I wasn't, interested in anything else anyway at that point. And I'm like, okay, I'll take all your stuff. And that was when I started subscribing to Comics Buyer's Guide and really sort of wallowing in the history. And it's like, I'm gonna do this. So I think that to a great degree, the fact that I just happened to be there when that wheel stopped, and some of those people later on, all of those people later on said, "Hey, I wish I had that stuff back." And it's like, yeah, I'm sure you do.
Sorry about your bad luck. It's in my collection.
It sucks to be you.
Yeah. So there's that, and I will say that, and this was really cool because related specifically to Strange New Worlds, this is another case of that where Strange New Worlds, and I announced this on Saturday after sending them copies of the book. I dedicated it to 3 of my teachers from junior high and high school, who had had a major impact on, what I did. One of them, Bernsey is what we called her, was a former nun from New York City, living in Memphis, Tennessee, and so the accent is already there. But also, she was, a hippie flower child sort of a person at that point, and so she was always interested in introducing us to things like we first saw MTV because she brought a big TV set and a videotape in.
Cool.
She thought it was visual poetry. She was into comics. She was into Bradbury. She would assign us these things. She let me turn in my stories but my essays in comics form. Just wonderful. Awesome. And she passed away a few years ago, but not before she knew that I was in this business. And I actually, when I went to San Diego Comic-Con for the first time, she had already moved out to California to teach English as a second language. Oh. And she was one of the first people I saw. And so, I dedicated the novel in part to her because I said, because she was into all of these things, and she would consider no memorial cooler than getting mentioned in a Star Trek novel.
That's awesome.
And then I had 2 other teachers who are still with us, and I sent them copies of the book, and they both sent back selfies, and they got tagged in all the Facebook posts this weekend, and so they're since retired. But look, everything is I think one of the reasons that on my website, I on my about page, it says that I strip mine my childhood for a living. I had what I would say is a pretty decent childhood. Certainly I would call it a privileged childhood, but with the fact that I had a house with books in it, I had my because of my mother, I had the pop cultural influence with my sister. My dad, who is just like my son, is not into reading, but is into gadgets and technology, and they're both into electronics, and so knowledge was in the house too. The science part of things is in there, and so I kind of look at that and I feel like, okay, I have an obligation, since I had this head full of useless information, to put it to use for folks. And I do hear from people saying these books have helped me get through times where things were not great.
Right. That's very cool.
And now, a word from our show sponsor, Level Up Sabers.
Their link can be found in the show notes.
All right, so we mentioned that you've talked about it yourself, that you've written a couple different sci-fi / nerd universes, Star Wars and Star Trek, most predominantly. I'm curious though, when somebody has written for both, because they're clearly two vastly different universes and how they function and the rules and how they operate and all these different things. Do you find it personally easier to write for one of the universes instead of the other because of your own personal fandoms, or have you found a happy medium in between the two?
Yeah, there have only been a few times where writing for both of them have overlapped. When I'm working on things, I know 2018 was the wild one because that was the year where I had something that I was working on for not just Star Wars and Star Trek, but also Battlestar Galactica too. It was because I wrote the 40th anniversary graphic novel or comic series for that. Which is a book called Counter-Strike, which is out there. And whatever it happens to be, I mean, the rules of each universe are different. Also, the themes of each series are different. Sort of the vibe of how the characters interact are different. One of the dynamics of Star Wars, at least the original movie, is that the characters don't want to be together. The characters are thrown together. They're thrown into an adventure that is not of their making, and they're very different from different backgrounds. Whereas Star Trek has the different backgrounds thing, but everybody's there on purpose. Everybody's there as part of a at least it's organized in a military structure. Whether it's actually a military or not is something that people debate. I think they have a whole lot of it, really, really powerful weapons to not be a military.
I would agree.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that actually is a theme, or that is one of the subplots in my Enterprise War novel. That is the first novel that has the Anson Mount, Captain Pike character on the book.
Right.
The one of the things about Enterprise War is the Enterprise is not able to participate in the Klingon War because they're stuck in a war of their own. They wander into somebody else's war, where the fact that Enterprise has these colossal weapons makes Enterprise both a prize and a battleground for the other sides. So that does come up. But I mean, the themes are different, and then of course the mechanisms of writing in the universe are different. Look, the Star Trek, you've got the transporter. The transporter is something which was created as a cost-cutting measure for the series, but it is storytelling magic. It allows you to go bang right to the right to where it is. You don't have to worry about what happens a lot in Star Wars, which is how does this ship land? How does the ship land? It's
crashing.
It's weird looking. It's
another happy landing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the giant ship that you see at the end of Empire Strikes Back. How does that thing land? Where's the door? You get in and out.
The fact that people in Star Wars seem to be able to fly their ships so well, it's like, have you ever gotten in a rental car and not known how to use the headlights? How do you just know how to fly this ship?
Well, and everybody just knows everything just like that. And and even though I do have stories every so often where there could be technical difficulties. We see them in Empire Strikes Back where they can't get the Falcon to work. But you can't ever science your way out of that difficulty. You can't ever pseudoscience your way out of that difficulty. We never find out exactly, reverse the power couplers or whatever. It's never more than gobbledygook. Whereas in Star Trek, you can actually come in there and Geordi LaForge will come in with a plan, and we'll talk about phase inverters and other things, and it has to sort of sound correct. So So it's interesting. These for two novels that were published 10 years apart. That's the Kenobi novel and Strange New Worlds. The Kenobi novel has one advisor in common, because I always try to get somebody who knows what they're talking about. It has one advisor in common with this novel. My friend Beth Kanan, who is she's an equestrian expert. She works with bloodlines and all that sort of thing that breeders are into. She helped me come up with what the saddles for the creatures in Tatooine would look like, the dewbacks. And because I didn't know the names for all the parts of it, and she said, okay, well, this thing here would be here, this thing here would be here, this thing here would be here. And so I can whip that kind of detail onto things, and I sound a little better. But then, of course, she also is in this book as well, helping me, because while this novel is not specifically a Western, it is a science fiction novel with horses in it, as my editor put it. So we got to deal with that. Now, it just also happens that this novel also has a particle physicist from Fermilab who helped me out on a couple of the ideas, and then also a planetary scientist who suggested some things about the planet. And that is something where if you're doing a Star Trek novel or something that's harder science fiction, it only the science only has to be good enough for Star Trek. Nobody should actually try to patent my ideas or try to aviate using any of my information. But people appreciate it if you make it sound like you tried.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So along the same sort of lines, though, as Tim was talking about, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit anyway. So having these already set universes that then you're writing in, does that help you with your creative process, or does it kind of hinder it because you're already stuck in somebody else's world? It's interesting to me to try to write in somebody else's already created universe.
The talk that I do at a variety of places on writing in a shared universe is called Rule the Galaxy Together. And sort of the notion is you're trying to we're all I liken these universes to national parks. We're trying to go there, we're trying to make use of all the things that are there, and then we're trying to leave the place the way it was when we found it. We're trying not to make a mess. And if you do add something, it better be good. But your job is not to come in there and say, hey, Lucasfilm, I have this really great idea. Luke and Leia, they're not twins, they're triplets. There's a third kid out there somewhere, and I've created it. No, that's not your role. Your role is to help them expand the brand and come up with something that's entertaining for the readers in between the movies or the TV shows or the whatever else. And so that's kind of what we do. But as far as actually navigating things, well, it all depends on whether the source material are still going or not. So, for example, when I did that Battlestar Galactica thing, I think I got 2 notes from Universal, because again, the show that I was basing it on was not the 2003 Galactica, but the 1978 Galactica. And so, their notes were just, make sure that, you can't, the comic can't be dark. It can't be dark. The new series is dark. The old series has Hope and Lord Green. And then also they suggested, let's see if we can confront Adama with a problem of his own making. Something that he's been pushed to do as a course of being in flight, and something where he can try to set it right. And that's great. That's the guidance that set me off to do the whole thing. Whereas if the show is going, if the show has many other people working on it, writing it, then it gets more complicated. You have to make sure you're not colliding with anything. What they do is they provide you the materials that you need. I never get into, what materials I have on anything I'm working for now. But it should be fairly obvious that, when I wrote the the New Dawn novel for Star Wars, which was the Rebel prequel. Well, the novel came out a month before the TV show started. So I had access to quite a lot of information. Plus I was the outline was read and responded to by Dave Filoni and the other two two executive producers, and then Filoni and I and the Lucasfilm Story Group were in a conference call discussing the book and everything else, and it all began with the executive producers sort of saying, well, here's the kinds of stories or the types of stories that you can tell and not collide with us. And what I do to make my life easier is I usually say I want as much room as possible. So I, on purpose, with A New Dawn, said, all right, the earliest possible story that they have suggested to me is how Kanan and Hera, the main characters, met. And that would have been 5 years before the TV show. And I said, that's cool. I'll do that, because that way I don't have to worry about the other characters who come along later and what I can and I can't say about them.
Cool. Yeah.
But what they said is, okay, well, you can do this. You can give us the meeting of these characters, and here's how we think that they will react to one another then. But you can talk about what's going on in Kanan's head, but you can't talk about what's going on in Hera's mind, because Hera's history was going to be revealed in the first season. And so again, that's fine. That's just part of that's part of the thing that I do. It's you can almost look at it as these are prequel TV episodes or prequel or episodes that are going to go in the middle of the series, or you can imagine it like that. We treat it like that's what it's going to be. And so we care about that amount of continuity. And then we care about continuity between book to book. And I also worry about books to comics and books to things that people don't care about. Because in Star Wars, everything since A New Dawn is now part of the canon. So you have to worry about all of it. Star Trek, the source material is still the source material. It's still the TV shows and everything. The novels that are being written, like we're doing, I call them canon adjacent, which is to say, sometimes we're actually able to do some cool things like, Die Standing introduces a character that did not appear in Discovery until after the novel came out. And it's because I knew that character was coming and they let me put that character in. That's not something that happened very often before that. But yeah, I'm always understanding that writing in these shared universes, particularly when the series are going, that's a moving target. It's one reason why I shy away sometimes from writing for video games, or writing for comics about video games, because the video games are always changing.
Yeah. So we have a Facebook group, and it has over 209,000, I think.
Yes.
And it is just filled with memes of this universe and that universe and various funny things. So if you could visit any universe, which universe would you like to vacation on?
Vacation on? Well, it's Cloud City is nice, but I don't dig heights. So, I did do a book on the casino world from episode 8. Canto Bight was the name of that, and that was that. There's no heights there, and that was a lot of fun because I wrote entirely about it. It's a novella that I wrote about a gambler. And so that's one of the lightest novels or novellas that I've ever written. There's the body count in it is 0. There's nothing really bad happening. Just a very pleasant place, and I'm like, okay, I can live there. So yes, Star Wars. It really depends on part of the universe you're living in.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't know. So many franchises, there are dystopic elements to it.
Fair enough.
And the places where I think I would be able to function best are not places that you would actually want to live. My favorite TV universe, I guess you were to set aside Star Trek, was the Max Headroom universe, which they say Max is coming back around. They've Christopher Cantwell is working on something for Max Headroom, and it's like, okay, the whole TV thing, I could certainly navigate that world and exist in it, but there's nothing good or pleasant about that place. So it's
true. All right, so at this point, John, you have navigated the FSF podcast interview.
Okay.
However, we have one final question for you. We like to call it our silly question.
Okay.
It's what we like to end on. So we're going to plant you in the Star Wars universe. And if you could use the Force to take care of one mundane task for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Well, that's the thing, because what I'd like is I'd like the transporter, so I never spend another moment in an airport. But Star Wars specifically forces you to go through airports. So it's
true.
Docking Bay 94 or whatever it is.
Luke didn't go through an airport to get to the one planet.
Yeah, you just had to go to the bar.
That's true. I will say I have never seen anybody in Star Wars do their taxes. And so, this being a February broadcast as we're doing this, I have to suspect that somebody is using the Force to handle their accounting. These are not the receipts you're looking for. I don't know. But
not the receipts you're looking for. Yeah,
it exactly. Is. Yes, it is a much more fun universe in that regard. They don't get into that kind of stuff.
There you go. I knew mine is the second I put this question down is that I was going to say folding laundry, that I could sit there and just be like,
well, yeah. That would be good. If I could tell every telemarketer over the phone that this is not the number they're looking for,
that would be great.
This is not the bank account you were looking for. So,
yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much for being on our show today. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you and your works?
Okay, this is going to take a while. Farawaypress.com is the website. I have behind the scenes notes on all of my stories, or most of my stories, chapter by chapter trivia, and sort of the director's commentary. On Twitter, it's JJM Faraway. It's also JJM Faraway on post.news. It is on Facebook, John Jackson Miller, Instagram, John Jackson Miller. As we'd mentioned, the novel Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The High Country, that comes out on the 21st of February. But if you're listening to this on the 18th, it might be out now, because sometimes these things sneak onto shelves before they actually are supposed to be there. They'll put them on the shelves when the box is open. So look around for it.
I was able to pre-order it on Audible, so.
Well, everybody can pre-order it, and we encourage everybody to pre-order everything. But those Audible things are not going to download until the 21st. Whereas, when a box shows up at the bookstore, sometimes, if there's no sticker on it saying "Do not put on sale yet," it'll be there.
It ends up on a bookend, yeah.
But yeah, and then I do have other releases coming up. Star Wars, I did a novel called Knight Errant some years ago, where I also did the graphic novels for it. Those graphic novels for Knight Errant are all coming out back into print for the first time in 9 years in March from Marvel. It's the Star Wars Legends Epic Collection Volume 5 for the Old Republic. And
very cool.
When you have all 5 volumes, you have almost everything I did for Star Wars at Dark Horse. So that comes out then, and then people will be able to find me physically talking about this book and signing and selling it. I will be. I noticed the Detroit Lions hat there. I will be. First of all, the book launch is February 21st in Madison, Wisconsin, at the Westtown Barnes and Noble. 7 p.m. I'm doing a talk and a signing there. Detroit, I'm in Detroit that weekend for the Great Lakes Comic Con in Warren, Michigan. And then the week after that, I'm at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, and I'm doing several panels there. And then 2 weeks out of that, after that, I'm at GalaxyCon in Richmond, Virginia, and that takes us about a month and a half in advance. And I've got more stuff coming up, more events, but those are the ones coming up.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Well, we will make sure that our viewers and our listeners can figure out where to find you, see where they can meet you in person, where they can find your book, where they can just enjoy the stories that you've shared with us today as well.
All right. Well, thank you all, and may the force live long and prosper.
Exactly. Yes.
Something like that.
Something like that. Absolutely. So I want to remind you guys that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that we get more amazing guests for you, like John Jackson Miller here today, to have these conversations and funny moments for you to be able to listen to. So please subscribe. It helps us far more than we can really describe. And check out John's work at the links down below. And you guys are going to want to make sure that you guys check out this book. Like I said, I'm about 10 chapters in, and I'm very much enjoying it. I'm looking forward to the rest of it to see how this thing pans out. But if for whatever reason you are not happy with the content of our show today, please feel free to lodge a complaint with the head of our complaint department, the Gorn. Now, I can neither confirm nor deny the appearance of the Gorn in John Jackson Miller's new book, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The High Ground. But I can tell you that ever since their reappearance in the Star Trek timeline, these creepy little lizard alien death machines are popping up everywhere and making life uncomfortable for everyone. Now, while you have every right to complain to our complaint department, after all, that's what it's there for, keep in mind that the Gorn aren't prone to caring who they eat, who was right, and who was wrong. Everybody looks like a meal. So although you may be right and we are more than likely in the wrong, we could both be eaten. So no matter how many copies your complaint you send in, that's the struggle. Good luck with that.
Well, thanks again, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to conclude us today for the FSF Popcast. Goodbye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Copyright 2023 FSF Popcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Popcast. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com. Original music by Jordan Michaels.